All right, now try it.
Better?
Yep, that did it.
Okay. Wow. All right, one more button we got to push. Right. So Chief Lilly, go ahead and introduce your role with the Community Council, please.
Yes, I guess good afternoon. It is Michael Lilienthal, Deputy Chief with El Dorado Hills Fire Department. I chair the Public Safety Committee, and my job is to try and network people that have issues with either law enforcement, fire, or any other public safety group to get their solutions in process based on the correct agency that can handle their problem.
Excellent. And Richard, can you speak for us now and share with us what your role is?
Yes, I handle the forum called Good Governance, and it's an effort to open up the activities of what occurs in our government systems and how they impact us and how we should be more engaged.
Excellent, thank you. And Glenn Krakow doesn't look like he's with us this evening. He represents economic development for the county. And Cindy Munt is also not with us. She's recovering from knee surgery. So she went in last Thursday and had a tough weekend, I guess, and is now starting to feel a little bit better and being able to communicate. And yeah, but what she tells me is be advised that since she's had both hips replaced and now one knee surgery recovery is much worse than hip replacement. So put that on your card. We're planning on having to do the other knee. So yeah. Bionic before too long here. So. But anyway, we wish Cindy well in terms of a speedy recovery and getting back to feeling really good again. So with that, I also want to identify any of our District 1 commissioners or committee members who may be present. Tita, I think you're here, right? So
Tita Bladen, El Dorado County.
All right. And I don't see any other commissioners or committee members at this point. So we'll leave it at that. And with that, I'm going to move to item 2, adoption of our regular meeting agenda. And does anyone on the leadership team propose any changes to tonight's agenda? All right, seeing none, then we'll move on to item 3, public comment. This is the period of the meeting we would entertain and appreciate anyone from the public who would like to comment or ask a question of the community council on anything that's not on tonight's agenda is welcome to do so at this point. So anyone have anything that's a situation that we should be aware of or a question that we may be able to help with? Okay, seeing none, let's go on to our guest speakers. And is Debbie on there?
Debbie is on here, but did you want to open it up to anybody who's any remote attendees?
I need to ask Debbie when Phil is going to be able to join us with Mr. Scott. Phil Scott's going to be able to, he's there. So.
Is Phil on?
Looks like he's here. Phil, are you ready?
Okay, so Phil is now a panelist.
Okay.
And make sure, I think he's muted.
Okay. So
okay, well, I'll start.
I'm here.
So let me introduce you real quick. Let me introduce you. Our guest speakers tonight are Debbie Manning, who's president and CEO of the El Dorado Hills Chamber, and Phil Scott from Folsom Partners, and they're going to be discussing the Highway 50 Economic Corridor Plan. So welcome. Go ahead, Debbie, please share with us the information.
Thank you, Supervisor Heidel. I'm just going to do a real short lead-in before I turn it over to Phil. You know, from a business standpoint, through our local chambers of commerce, it's almost like any entity that works together. There's power in numbers, and years ago we actually did the highway, the Fab 50, and it was a marketing council for Rancho, El Dorado Hills, Folsom, up until about Cameron Park. What we're doing now is we realize when there is company interest on the 50 corridor, you know, the interest pretty much is Rancho Cordova, Folsom, El Dorado Hills, maybe a little bit on up to Cameron Park and a little further. And we've all realized that if we pool our resources, we have a lot better chance, because a business may be a fit for Folsom and not El Dorado Hills. It may be a fit for Rancho Cordova and not El Dorado Hills. So with the power of us all working together, we've created the 50 Economic Alliance. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Phil, because he can give a better overview of where we are and how we started and where we're going. So with that, Phil, I turn it over to you.
Good. Well, thanks a lot, Debbie. And it's a pleasure, everybody. Phil Scott with the Greater Folsom Partnership. We're based here in Folsom. We handle economic development, the Chamber of Commerce, and tourism, all under the same umbrella, the Greater Folsom Partnership. And what's really exciting, what Debbie was referring to, was about 15 plus years ago, we used marketing collateral under the name the Fabulous 50 Corridor. We had, and even to date it, we even used DVDs as well as print material. It was way back in the old days. But there's a saying: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's really what this is about: is for us to come together. And we have the highest density of non-government payroll in our region along the Highway 50 corridor. And so for us to be able to maximize our impact, and also the thing that unites us is the Los Rios Community College District. And so along our corridor, we have that. And it's probably our most underutilized resource in terms of attracting businesses to come here to our region. So in working with our academia to include Sac State, UC Davis, and Los Rios, in terms of upskilling and having a prepared workforce, it's massively important. And so we've come together, we've been meeting now for about 8 months. We meet on a regular basis. And there's dollars that we can already attribute to our efforts. We had a company that does hydrogen research that needed a spot to land. And so I knew we didn't have space here in Folsom. So I sent them up to Debbie and Ansync Labs there in El Dorado Hills in the business park. And so there's an example of how, if we don't have a home for it, like Debbie just said, we'll pass it off to one another. We know that when we locate companies, whether it's irrespective of the geopolitical boundaries, if it comes to our region, it's a win for all of us, because somebody may live in El Dorado Hills or clear up Cameron Park, Placerville, and work down here or vice versa and spend their money somewhere along the corridor. So we're going to do some proactive outreach. We have a CRM already identified. We're going to be doing both digital presence, social media, and really reaching into the Bay Area, and not as a competitive of ours as Silicon Valley, but it's a complement to us to be able to attract businesses that may want to buy, locate, or try locate out here because of the cost of real estate and living comparatively to the Bay Area, plus a highly talented workforce. If you look at the companies that are in our region, it's nothing short of amazing. And so they know that they can get people that are qualified, highly educated, and motivated to work. And so we're really getting some traction. We also purchased Granite School in Folsom. That transaction has closed, and we're going to use that as the hub for the Northern California Innovation District. We've got a company from San Jose, Light AI. They do the traffic signaling using machine learning so that people don't have to do that, and it can learn the patterns and change the signals to match what the demand and flow is. They're taking space there in Granite School. We also have a blockchain company from Ireland is literally setting up there. They'll be fully functional with 5 people next week. We also have Beconics, which is a startup company that's doing their pre-seed work right now. And the goal would be is along our region is to have multiple locations where businesses that want to start up is that they can come and get mentoring, whether it's human resources, marketing, operations, it doesn't matter. The answer would be, yes, we can help you. Our ability to attract and land the majors, I'm not going to spend any time going after Google, Facebook, Salesforce, any of those large companies, but we do have a strong desire to go after small and medium-sized companies that may need some additional help from our grown-up companies. And it's that collaboration and building the ecosystem to where we can have companies thrive. One of the best ones we have in our town, recently you may have heard of, is that Power School went public. That was started in Folsom in '98, and Bloomberg just pegged them at about $6 billion. So if we can pull off 3 or 4 more of those, support businesses from when they're small to then when they get larger, the economic impact of a rolling effect of $1 in our community is very, very high. And so, you know, it's something that through different verticals, life sciences, ag and food tech, then as we know, anything that ends in ware, software, hardware, midware, firmware, along our corridor, that's our strength. That is our bread and butter. The advantage too is El Dorado Hills has zoning that we don't have in Folsom, industrial specifically, and R&D, and then also so does Rancho Cordova. So I think we have a great, it would be analogous when you walk into Baskin and Robbins, they don't ask you if you want an ice cream, they ask you what flavor. So by us all coming together is if a company has interest, we don't ask them, can you help us with business? We'll say, yeah, what do you need? And we'll be able to place you. So it's exciting times. I'm very grateful for Debbie and her leadership there in El Dorado Hills, Diane down in Rancho Cordova, and then Joe and I here in Folsom helping out. And again, it's when we stick together is when we'll have our greatest success. So happy to answer any specific questions, and just know that we are collaborating at a very high level, which is attractive. I was on the phone today with a guy in the UK, one in Ireland, and one from even out of San Diego. The guy out of San Diego says, the thing that's attractive to me about your region right now the most is the way that you all communicate and collaborate. We don't have that in San Diego. And I said, just come here to the greater Sacramento region, specifically the 50 EA. I can get everyone that's involved in a room on a meeting with you, and we would love to have your business move here. So it's great times, great things ahead. I've never been more bullish. I've lived in Folsom now for 30 years. I think it's a great community. I love our region. If anybody doesn't like California, I'll help them pack. I'm very biased. I was born and raised, and I'm going to die here too. So with that, open for any questions.
All right, thank you, Phil. Any member of the leadership team would like to pose a question to Phil first of all? I have one, Phil. How closely do you work with GSEC, Greater Sacramento Economic Council? Are you connected with them or not?
Almost via umbilical cord. Very, very close, probably 4 or 5 times per week at a minimum. I'm on with either Hunter or Adam or Lucy or Scott Powell, or with Barry even. We're in close contact with GSEC. And so what's exciting is we know we have a great team on the 6-county region, but they can't be experts down to the level of granularity that Debbie and myself and Diane, right? We know the businesses in our own backyard. So by them helping attract companies to our region, then we can help filter it down. And so it's a very, very close and collaborative relationship there.
Excellent, good to hear. So with that, is there anybody online, the Leadership Council, who'd like to ask a question? Okay, so let's open it up then to attendees in present here, and then we'll finish. Does anyone have a question for Phil? Yeah.
What are some of the obstacles in getting companies to move up here? Political, tax incentives, cost of housing. What are the obstacles of getting companies?
Yeah, I think it's reputational, right? I mean, for so long, people have seen us as an outlier, but now there's one of the terms that's being very widely used as a mega region. So they don't see Sacramento as this outlier that it used to be. We always Silicon Valley. And so it's really overcoming that perception. And that's the value of what we're doing, is putting together the numbers of what is our educational attainment in our region? What is the household income? What is our person-on-person crime rates? What is our person-on-property crime rates? And publishing it so that people know that when they come here, that we're not, by and large, we're not at wildfire risk. We're seismically stable in our region. That's why they built 2 dams, Folsom Dam and Nimbus Dam, where they did. So overcoming some of the things that people have thought. And so it's really because, and it's not a real estate play. That's not enough. Our experience is that's generally not enough just to say we have cheaper real estate. It's not enough to get people to move, but it's by coalescing all of these items and creating a more vivid picture of why they would move here. The singular, if I had to say what's the one thing, it's the lack of digital skills for people in the space surrounding the cloud and doing those computing type services has been what we've heard over and over. And so that's something we're working on, and is definitely Barry, and that's one of his biggest initiatives, is that digital upskilling for our region.
Internet connectivity, data speeds and that sort of thing. Are you hearing specific requirements from certain companies in terms of the type of connection they have to be successful? Because I know we have some shortcomings in our business park, and I'm trying to understand if there's a bottom threshold of acceptability.
No, you know, I certainly haven't come across that. Everything that we have available here. What is a concern, and one right now, this is a very specific real time, is that SK Hynix is buying a division of Intel. It's about 1,000 people at the Folsom campus, and they're looking in Rancho Cordova, but the power, literally the amount of electricity that they need at a location they found is not enough for their needs. So we're scrambling, trying to work with one of our local developers, a household name, is to be able to locate them here to keep them. So I would say it's not the connectivity, at least, you know, down this direction. It's more of making sure that we have enough, especially in the R&D space, is that there's enough literal bandwidth of electricity.
Open it up for anyone who's an attendee to go ahead, and can you raise your hand if you would like to ask Phil a question or make a comment? If you're on Zoom, please raise your hand if you have a question. Okay, we're not seeing any. And how do we connect with the phone number there?
So if you're dialed in on a phone call and you want to ask a question, go ahead and star 9. I can't remember what it is. Is it 9? I'm blanking right now.
I think it's star 9.
Is it 9? Star 9. I normally have it written down in front of me.
Yeah, and I normally have it too, but I don't have it with me tonight. So, okay.
So, yeah, and then 6 is to mute or unmute.
Right.
Okay, so.
All right, so I don't think we have any questions. So any go back for anybody?
You know, Phil, I would ask one question. At APAC, you know, we're always talking about transportation, and as Supervisor Heidel mentioned, was probably some of the utilities, you know, power and that data infrastructure. In terms of transportation along Highway 50 not being at out at the main airport, but being aligned with Mather, are there any issues withdrawing business because of the location of the airport or with the transportation aspect here of US 50?
No, I'd say that's one of our strongest attributes. If you look at transportation, we have a deep water port of Sacramento. We have 3 cargo airports in Mather, McClelland, and Sac International. You can also land private planes in Cameron Park and in Mather. We have Highway 50, which is, I-80 going San Francisco to New York, so coast to coast, and then I-5 going north-south, Canada to Mexico, and we're the only location where those 2 cross. So in terms of, we also have heavy freight in terms of rail, so we've got every mode of transportation. Then with light rail, the extension of that, and RT, the use of that, and I know we have El Dorado County has the transit. That's not one that we, and comparatively to the Bay Area, our traffic problems are, it just, people scoff at it of, you know, okay, I had to sit in traffic for 15 minutes. It's just not, or 20 minutes. Hopefully the work that they're doing more towards downtown will help alleviate that. We know the East Area Connector that's going to come out at Silva Valley Parkway and eventually go all the way down Highway 99, that will, you know, take and bypass and get some relief. Green Valley Road, the extension on up into El Dorado Hills by 4 lanes, and then the connection up over the top past Costco, that's completed now too. So I think we're working on some what's considered parallel capacity to Highway 50 that's going to make some differences. We also know that the Cloverleaf at Empire Ranch is still on the books. Boy, that could help as well. But I think that what's really intriguing is to see what percentage of our workforce is now going to be able to work more remote is that like just physically getting people off the road, not making the roads necessarily bigger or better, but is just seeing how that's going to play out. Every conference and talk that I've heard in on, it ranges from about 25 to 30%. Everybody's not going to work remote. That's a fallacy. But think about that. If we had a 25 to 30% reduction in the people getting in their cars, that would be fantastic.
Very good. Any other go backs? All right, not seeing it. Hey, Phil, I want to thank you for the alliance working obviously between the multiple cities and El Dorado County, El Dorado Hills. One of the things that, we've looked at the county is what do we need to do to attract high quality businesses? And I know everybody's after those same type of targets. But is there anything that you're aware of that El Dorado County might be able to do to be more competitive? We've talked about incentives. We've talked about tax deferrals. Do you have any feel for what it takes these days to be in that top 2 or 3 candidate areas? Shed any light on that?
Yeah, I think it's similar to what we do on a daily basis. Is paying attention to our infrastructure. I'm not, even as a taxpayer, I'm not a huge fan of handing out money to people that you have little to no control over and only really minimal influence, because we don't know if they're good business people. So just giving people money and incentives in that way versus investing in our infrastructure, so police and fire, our schools, things of that nature, I think is going to give us larger dividends long term, right? Let's take the long approach. And I think that just it's even as simplistic as when they make a request for information and making them feel welcomed, and that we will go out of our way to facilitate them, and playing up on the things that we do have, the natural resources that are available, and then now certainly the addition and having this quality of life become a larger decision-making process, because people can work from a lot more areas than they used to be. They're not going to have to go into the office the way they used to. And I think really playing El Dorado, I tell everybody, El Dorado County has the sexy that we don't have. We don't have the lakes and the rivers and the creeks and the mountains and all the beautiful stuff that El Dorado County does. And so that's why I still think it's great as a region when we take the strengths of the different parts of our region together collaboratively. That's where we're a very, very attractive option.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So Debbie, did you have any final comments you would like to make?
Well, I think Phil's done a great job. I cannot stress enough. This is, public-private. El Dorado County is involved. Kyle Zimbelman is part of this EA group, as is Rancho Cordova's economic development. And the more that we can all work together, the more successes we're going to have up and down the 50 corridor. So I'm really proud to be part of this new alliance, and Phil does great work. He lives and breathes it, as do the other chambers and the Econ Dev organizations. So stand by and watch good things happen on the 50 corridor.
Outstanding. Thank you. I think it's a good motto. Can we put that on the website somewhere?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. It hasn't changed. Together we stand, divided we fall. That hasn't changed.
There we go.
It's not
Amen.
going to change. Right?
And I think our standard motto is elevate to El Dorado, right? So that goes together too. Put them all together. Yeah.
Debbie's too, but okay. Thank you all. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, John.
Yeah, I want to thank both Debbie and Phil.
Richard has.
Oh, Richard, I'm sorry. Richard.
Thank you. Given the desire to bring industry in and the recognition of a growing component of employees who will be working remotely, there almost seems to be a certain disconnect there. More people want to work remotely, yet we want to bring the industries in. Where I'm going with this is, if people are able to work remotely, then the quality of the life where they're at seems to be a much greater factor for them. And some of the things we're going through in El Dorado Hills, particularly relative to recreational access, etc., would seem to be more significant now as a drawing power. We all know, as an example, that the flood of interest in El Dorado Hills real estate among Bay Area residents has really been phenomenal in this last 9 months. So maybe we should be thinking and linking more our quality of life in El Dorado Hills as a relatively unique factor, given that it is, we are so close to the 50 corridor. We are adjacent to the business park, and we are the gateway to, as you point out, this rather spectacular El Dorado County geography that we have. So I think maybe there can be maybe a bigger linkage within the El Dorado Hills district as to the quality of living here, and make that an asset that we use as part of the total package. Not that there aren't other nice places in Folsom and environs, but right now we seem to be kind of have a thumbtack on the map right now.
Yes, I would say yes. We definitely want to keep that front and center. I think that, you know, certainly I would, when talking about El Dorado Hills, is really stress the quality of education that people can get K-12, right? If you look at Oak Ridge being just a premier educational facility, smart people and people that own businesses don't want to move somewhere where their kids are going to get a bad education or where they're going to not feel safe. Right. So those are all things for us to promote as well, plus the existing businesses that are already here. And if you look at, and I was with ANSYNC Labs today, anything from ideation to prototype, we've got phenomenal businesses in the El Dorado Hills Business Park. And the question was asked, I was with President Yamamura from Folsom Lake College this morning in the makerspace. And the gentleman that runs that, Zach, he says, well, we've got 5 people from Folsom Lake College up here at ANSYNC. How are we telling that story? And I said, we're not. We need to tell the story better on our websites, through social media, so that people can see that public-private partnerships that we're doing, and that we have jobs, because we have the academia to get smart people, but we need to make sure we have the jobs to keep the smart people here, not have them go somewhere else. And that's really a big part of what we're going to do is really spend time on that. Sir, I think I love El Dorado Hills. I love this whole region. I believe that El Dorado Hills, the business park, my biggest concern for El Dorado Hills Business Park is making sure as we don't lose the industrial zoning there, because for R&D and companies to come, if it all gets converted to residential, it's something that then we don't have that zoning either, is that then we lose that capacity. So I think that there's business growth that's definitely happening. I think the vision of town center and the build out through there is fantastic, and it's finally coming. And so I think that my 3 words would be stay the course. I think we're on course for greatness, and now going forward, it's a discussion of how can we make something that's already great, make it even better. I don't see great significant holes in anything that we have along our corridor.
Excellent. That's good to hear. So, okay. So any final go backs? Not seeing any. Thank you again, Phil and Debbie, for your presentation, and really appreciate it, and look forward to working with you closer in the future here. I know Debbie works with you closely, Phil, but we're really trying to ramp up the El Dorado economic development stuff. So I look forward to that. So thank you.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. So we'll move on to item 5, supervisor communications. These should go pretty quick. I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware that we have reopened the board chambers up in Placerville, that we had our first hybrid meetings. We're still doing Zoom and open meetings like this setting so the public can attend. We did that on June 22nd. So we've had a couple meetings now under our belt with that. That seems to be moving forward pretty well. The Board of Supervisors Healthy Children's Resolution was something that was presented by Supervisor Turnbow, where he was concerned, based upon the inputs from a lot of local parents, that the concern was when the school reopens in late summer, early fall, in August, September, that the kids will be required to go back wearing masks, that it won't be optional. And before all the state news that came out recently is yesterday, the county was very heavily advocating for the same thing, that give the choice to the parents, give the choice to the teachers. If they choose to wear masks, that's fine. If they choose to have the kids wearing masks, that's fine, but it should be optional. But the information I read yesterday seems to be reversing that, at least to the California Department of Public Health is saying you have to return with the mask with a few exceptions, medical excuses or medical releases, whatever you want to call it, those kinds of things. So I'm not sure how that's all going to play out, but it's a huge disappointment. The board had actually included in part of the resolution another request to the governor, an appeal to the governor to please allow local control to determine how we do these things within our county. And that hasn't happened yet. So there was a discussion of submitting a letter, and I'm not sure where that stands. It seems like that's also slowed down. So when the state kind of works against you and is not as flexible as we'd like to see, the CDC, if you haven't read, the CDC is saying make it optional, but our state is saying no, you have to wear masks. At least that's the way I'm reading, with a few exceptions. So that issue will continue, I'm sure, but we did what we thought we needed to as a board to step up and say, yeah, we believe the parents should be supported in this, the teachers need to have our support, but it should be an optional situation. So with that, I'm going to move on to the next two, which are upcoming meetings. We have our next board supervisors good governance strategic planning workshop scheduled for July 16th, this Friday. And so we've done some prep work on that. It's open to the public. It is a Zoom meeting, but we're also going to be meeting in person. So it'll be a hybrid type of setting, but it's where the board gets a chance to talk with staff about what are the necessary changes or what are the desired changes we should be looking at in terms of operating protocols, in terms of policy, in terms of things that we think that we can continue to improve with the way we operate. And there's several things that have come up recently that will be discussed that were kind of new, that were COVID driven. As you might expect, for whatever reason, when you operate remotely and do a lot of stuff on Zoom, you don't get the communication level you'd like to have. And so there were some things that came before the board that would have been better if we'd had more time to at least understand how the presentation was going to come. We have to honor the Brown Act. I'm not saying mass communication, but at least a little bit more heads up working with the staff. But I think a lot of that's attributed to the disconnectivity, the lack of working together that happens with Zoom just because of its nature. So we're going to talk through some of those things, and we may need to set some additional protocols and determine, again, how we streamline things and make it as efficient as possible. Then the second meeting I wanted to note is the joint workshop. It's been scheduled on July 19th with the Planning Commission. So it's Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission. We're going to be receiving a general plan housing element update prepared by CJ Freeland and the consultant. And this is all related to affordable housing and the categories of affordable housing the state defines within the RENA numbers and what we're doing to plan for that. And I'm sure we're going to have some discussion about some of the new legislation that's coming forward, if it's approved, what that will do to change that scenario a little bit. I'm going to talk about SB 35 a little bit later, but that's one of the things that the state has done that significantly changed our discretionary review process. And there's a whole bunch of other bills out here that have opportunity to do the same thing. So the state is really pushing for more housing. And the thing that they're stressing is the lower end of the affordable housing. So very low income, the moderate incomes we always meet in El Dorado County, but we really struggle trying to build anything that's in the low income or very low income in particular. So that's what that workshop is all about. How do we meet the state requirements that SACOG has passed on to us as part of RENA? How do we get creative? What kind of ordinance changes do we need to have? Are we going to include things like inclusionary housing? There's a new ordinance, which a lot of communities have done. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion in terms of all the good ideas that are put on the table and what decisions are made. But I think pretty much universally, the board recognizes we have to do something to promote more of the lower end affordable housing. It's just, how do you do it? Where do you do it? The where is probably tougher than the how. With the state monies that are coming forward to subsidize some of these things, it's where's the appropriate place to do it? And how do you make sure that that's done with the right safeguard so that the community that results is sustainable and it's a high quality community. It's not just a apartment complexes that deteriorate in 5 years and nobody wants to live there anymore, that type of thing. So, but things like SB 35 make that more difficult. So those were the things I wanted to share with everybody. It's kind of an update. Are there any questions on any of those items from anybody on the leadership team?
No. The only thing I was going to say is that I was going to reach out to CJ to see if she wanted to make sort of a narrower presentation of what she's going to present to the board for a future APAC meeting, but it'll wait till your board hears it. But
Okay.
CJ is a wealth of knowledge, and we were well informed when she came and presented to us last year.
Yeah, ask for the Reader's Digest version.
Yes.
Or whatever, right?
Well, yeah, I sat through the workshops, and the one we got at APAC was actually longer than the workshop. So we need to, but no,
Okay.
it's valuable information.
That is, and I think it's something the greater public needs to understand these things, because everybody gets upset when a housing project is proposed. But the bottom line is supervisors have fewer and fewer alternatives with some of this stuff that's coming forward. So again, driven by the state's mandates and the legislation that's being passed more than anything. But we still have to have our general plan. We have to have our zoning ordinance. But when we talk about the legislation that's pending, what you're going to find is a lot of the legislation, if it's passed and if it's signed off by the governor, will drive us to make a lot of additional changes. And some of those changes are not going to be well received by the public. Let's just put it that way. So they are what they are.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So you talk about like the state subsidizing, and so the idea of where to put it can be challenging. If the state, so some real estates are expensive. Dorado Hills is very, very expensive. I mean, does the state provide enough subsidizing to overcome the cost of development here and land value?
There's a federal program, there's a state program, there's a lot of different things going on, but the state has provided certain incentives, let's put it that way.
Okay.
So it's dependent upon whether you qualify for the incentives, so to speak. But the thing that we've seen happen most recently with some of the smaller low-income housing that we're in the process of getting approved is that somebody's a benevolent property owner and they dedicate the land, they donate the land to an affordable housing builder.
Yeah.
And then that facilitates it, because if you get the land without having an expense, then the other funding that comes along can make it much more achievable from the standpoint of now you can get something done. But they've got some new things coming out that I have no idea how they're going to play out, but I would put them in the category of incentives. But you still have a quota you're supposed to be hitting, right?
Right.
So that's what the discussion is going to largely revolve around. How do we do this, and where do we do it, and those kinds of things. So any other questions or comments on any of that? Yeah, Tim.
The county's general plan was, I think, really redone back in 2005 or so. It's been amended a few times. When is the county going to go and do a complete revision of its general plan and present it to the voters for their approval like was done 20 years ago?
I think the next major, they have had some major general plan updates. I think the next major general plan update is like 2 years. We're allowed to do 4 updates a year. So it's not like you can't do updates, but what we've asked the planning department to do is to basically collect and aggregate certain things to do it, so that we don't have necessarily 4 meetings, but maybe 2 that have everything in them that we want to do. Because a lot of times there's association with one thing in the general plan gets changed. If you don't think about the impact of something else, there can be an influence on that. So you've got to look at that whole scenario. But we've asked them to kind of group the changes to the general plan and then bring things forward. One of the things that we know we have to look at, for instance, is the ordinance that we have on trees, oak trees and stuff. So our oak resources management plan has to have some revisions to it. We've gone through a learning curve. We need to make changes there. And a lot of this involve consultants oftentimes. We have a consultant that prepared the original document, and then you're actually getting an update on it based upon the history, the data that's been collected. And so there's always those kinds of adjustments. But unfortunately, a lot of those that were planned to happen in 2020 didn't happen because of COVID, right? So we're now still kind of playing catch up with some of that stuff that got pushed to the right. But yeah, we tend to aggregate them, but I think the next the major is 2 years. So.
And so for a general plan update, do you envision it would likely not be a public vote. It would just be the board.
It would probably be the board unless there's a new measure that gets passed. Because obviously we had Measure Y and then we had Measure E. And so those things changed the
Yes.
dynamics. And then SB 35 came along that says a lot of the stuff that was put in Measure E, even though a lot of that was found to be unconstitutional, you still can't use because it's not of a standard that you can, it's subjective. And you have to have objective standards. They have to be very specific, very clear. And so our county council's gone through and weighed a lot of those things. And I know John was involved with a lot of the SB 35 presentations in terms of what you can and can't do. And I listened in on a lot of it, but that's a changing dynamic. Things are moving there. So yeah, I don't know what else to say. Okay, any other questions or go back? Anybody online with their hand up?
On the attendees and none of the panelists.
Not seeing any. Okay, very good. So then let's go to our leadership team progress reports. We always start with public safety so we can release them if they have other duties they need to get back to. So we normally start with the sheriff's report. Do we have
I didn't see any other attendees.
Morton on?
I did not see. No.
Okay, all right. So then we'll go to the CHB. Officer Brown is here, and Rick, good to see you again. So Lieutenant Hatfield.
You're both on a camera right now if you want to use the microphone.
There you go.
Great, thanks. Well, hello everyone. It's good to actually see somebody face to face. I'm Rick Hatfield, the commander of the Placerville area office. Next to me here is Andrew Brown, our public information officer. Some updates for us specific to this area. Within the last few months, we've just been discussing ongoing parking development and traffic complaints. That's typically our involvement with this specific region within the county. Most recently, we've had a bolstered presence in all the school districts throughout the summer schools. I've been meeting with each superintendent myself personally. We have a couple of new ones in this region, so just been overgoing some new of the programs, some using us as a resource, trying to identify choke points, ways to mitigate traffic plans throughout the school districts once we get those, those congested times of drop off and pick up, et cetera. For us, we've seen a huge shift, a massive shift in our traffic picture, specifically the county roads and the freeways because of what has COVID done. And as someone mentioned earlier, folks being at home working has changed our traffic picture. On one hand, it's good because it's good for us as commuters, but on the flip side, we're seeing speeds up. So we're trying our best to take back those freeways. So we're doing maximum saturation enforcements throughout the rest of the summer. We are resuming our grant objectives and activities such as DUI checkpoints that have been shut down throughout the last year. We've found alternative ways to still enforce that, of course, with roving patrol and different strategies, but now we're actually going to be resuming those activities, as well as our grant objectives, such as in the schools, our every 15-minute program, Smart Start for our young drivers, in-person training, car seat events, bicycle rodeos. We've got a car show coming up at Cameron Park Airport, or Cops and Marauders is coming up. What's else? Regionally, our department, we're dealing, we've got a huge project up in Camino, the Camino project near Apple Hill. They're putting the center divide. They're just going to separate the west and eastbound lanes. So we've been focusing a lot of our efforts up there. We're preparing for Apple Hill, the new traffic committee that we've formed, so we can kind of get that moving so we're not so much congested through the city of Placerville. And also we're focusing a lot of our efforts combined with Caltrans for homeless encampment impact.
Homeless encampment impact. Huh?
Yeah.
So where are those hot spots?
There's some different spots throughout the county. There's different criteria. There's a different tier system that Caltrans use as far as how we sort of triage certain encampments. Our department is primarily focused with how it impacts the pedestrian traffic near roadways, et cetera, while on state property. So it's that's we don't define the criteria. Caltrans does.
Okay, Officer Brown, did you want to add anything? Got it covered, right?
Happy to be here. Happy to see all your faces.
Yeah, very good.
This is what I look like.
From here now.
Yeah.
you brought your real face this time. We got tired of looking at that hologram, or whatever it was you had on your.
Brad, that was Brad.
Okay, questions or comments from the leadership team? Yeah.
You work collaboratively with the sheriff concerning the homeless campus and stuff because they have very proactive program.
Team, yeah, they actually have a
Hot team. Yeah.
Yep, we've been communicating with them also. And just identifying resources throughout the county too. It's a difficult, as you know, it's a sensitive topic. I mean, folks need resources too. So we're dealing with public health and other folks in the private sector to try to identify where do they go, and just try to, get them the services they need. Mental health as well.
And I would just throw in observational, I ran down to Sacramento today and was shocked. I was in the slow lane. I thought, I'm going kind of quick. And people had to be doing 85 to 90 miles an hour. I haven't gone to Sacramento in a while. I took a North Shore a couple weeks ago. That's always like that. But to see it on 50 in the middle of the day, 11 o'clock in the morning, it was odd. So yeah, the speeds are up.
That's not only on the highways, I think it's locally.
Well, yeah.
Saratoga Way, we've had some complaints on, you've heard about those. Wilson, the connection off of Saratoga, those are ongoing.
And we did, and the department was very generous with our concern in the Bass Lake area, in our Bass Lake villages with the community meeting we had there. And I would say, again, it was perception. It would seem that speeds are down. It also kind of coincided with the road opening back up too on Bass Lake Road. So. But the department was generous. You both were very communicative. We had a great conversation with the community.
Good to hear it. Keep those complaints coming. Helps if you can provide as much information as possible, time of day, etc., days of weeks. So when it's time to actually determine where to deploy those resources, I can make them as effective as possible.
I know you were applying for a grant to try to get a motorcycle unit, I guess, to operate. No, did that go through, or
it's not a grant? It's still in the works. It's internal with us.
Oh, it is. Okay.
It's up to me to actually be able to articulate and substantiate the need.
Okay.
That's my loss. It's strictly internal.
Okay. All right. Good.
Still in the works.
I think that would be favorable, obviously, because
well, our population's here in the county,
yeah.
I mean, so it makes sense to deploy this resource. Presence.
Okay, any public comments and any attendees here first? Anyone has a question they'd like to ask of either of the two CHP representatives? Yeah, Tim.
You're aware that Silver Valley and Harvard is in for about an 8-week period of major redoing coming up, and it's starting in the next few weeks. You have extra enforcement there when that starts, and particularly when school starts, because when they're digging up those roads and the parents are trying to drop off the kids in the middle of the road like they do now, we're going to need extra CHP and sheriff enforcement during those times.
That's good to know. I'm glad you brought that to my attention. So we will discuss some different deployment resources and strategies.
Doc can get you talk to Department of Transportation. They already have it scheduled.
Okay.
Yeah, that project's starting today. Technically, I don't know how much work's being done when it goes through the end of September.
Yeah, so it's a pretty long period.
And 4 schools on the road.
So briefly, daytime construction only. Are they just reducing one lane during construction? Is it still open?
They're adding an extra lane to make turns and stuff, and then they're widening some other areas, is what I understood the plan.
Yeah.
And we had tried to convince them that all needed to be complete before school starts, but it didn't work out that way. So
that's the construction world. Delays and materials right now are we're dealing with the same thing in Camino. But I will educate it, not to sound preachy at all, but oftentimes I get the same question, like, for example, on the Camino project, where they see a patrol car parked within a closure for a certain amount of time, for 6 hours, 8 hours. Often people don't realize that's actually a separate contract. That's not something that we do on our own. So that's typically a contractual basis between, say, for example, the County of El Dorado DOT or Caltrans, where they'll actually hire an officer on overtime where he or she is devoted strictly to that project for the entire time, and we're their customer. They're our customer.
okay, so let's open it up to any Zoom participants. If you have a question for our CHP representatives, please raise your hand.
No panelists.
Okay, we're not.
No attendees.
All right, very good. Thank you again.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you for showing up, Rick.
Of course,
I think it's the first time you've been able to attend, obviously in person, but yeah, look forward to maybe your periodic attendance in the future.
Of course, yeah, me too.
Okay, with that, we need our fire report. We got Chief Lilly on and we got Chief Johnson here too. So maybe we'll start with Chief Lilly and then we'll let Chief Johnson follow up. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so yeah, no, thank you. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I'm actually joining you from the community of Portola. I'm currently assigned to the Beckworth complex. It's a 90,000 acre wildfire. And we've been out for about 12 days right now so far. So staffing a incident support unit that the Office of Emergency Services has assigned to the El Dorado Hills Fire Department. And in turn, we provide staffing for that resource. So things are going well in the El Dorado Hills.
Go ahead, Chief. Yeah, please.
I'll pick up where Mike left off. So they're up there at the fires, 90,000 acres right now. It's still growing every single day. We're getting additional resources up there. And so that's what the ISU is really responsible for, just kind of managing all of those resources, local government wise, on all the fires within that region. So that's really, what we've been working on here locally. We've had a number of smaller fires. None of them to this point have been arson related. They've all just been kind of man-made, which is what we typically see. What we have noticed is that some of these fires are picking up. That's Mike right there, lost connection. Internet's down. These fires are picking up and they are growing exponentially. So probably our biggest one, 35 acres, which is right down the road here at Valley View Parkway and Broadstone or Blackstone. That one ripped 35 acres in about 20 minutes. And it got, by the time we got there to the base, which is 6-minute drive time from here, it was already to the top of the hill. And so when you look at the high temperatures that we are experiencing or have been experiencing, the lower humidities, the lack of rain, which certainly hasn't helped, and then just the new growth that's out there, we're in for quite the fire season. So we've had a number of fires, really close calls. Another one right down here at the base of Serrano Parkway and EDH Boulevard, which spotted over and had the potential to start running up to the top of the hill, but our crews were able to stop it. There's still some nuisance fires that are out there. Folks still want to burn. Unfortunately, they haven't got the message. The other one that we see a lot, we just had a fire down in Latrobe not that long ago, is they're still mowing after 11 o'clock. And so when you're out there mowing at 2 or 3 o'clock, you're starting these fires, you're going to get fined. And if there's any damage, CAL FIRE is certainly going to cite you and come after you. So it's important just to send those reminders. We're in the process of making a PSA to kind of remind people of those things. Just don't do it. When it's 110 and you can feel that hot air, you shouldn't be outside doing those kinds of things. And then lastly, we do get vehicles from time to time. They're, taking their trailers or their boats and those kind of things, dragging chains up the roadway. Those spark on the ground and they typically start fires along the sides of the roadway. So that's what we've been experiencing here locally. We haven't had any major fires, if you will, but certainly they're taking off a lot faster than we've ever seen them earlier in the season. May 1st was our first fire. That was, again, about 30 acres. And again, that was off Salmon Falls, and it went right to the top of the ridge pretty darn quick. Certainly. Sure. So our regulars that we typically force abate, which is to say that we give them time. If they don't comply, the fire department incurs that cost. We send crews out via contract to mitigate those properties, and then we lien their properties to recoup the costs and admin costs associated with that. For the most part, it's most of the normal ones that we typically see. They're most of the time they're out of area owners. So sometimes out of state owners, and I think they just rely on that service to get it done. I think we've had certainly some more awareness that's been out there, so that's helping. So there is a higher instance, if you will, of non-compliance this year. A lot of that might be that we've hired 3 defensible space inspectors. That is what their job is. They're temporary employees. And what we are finding, we're having significant impact on our prevention staff and starting to get behind in some of our development, enforcement, and plan review. So we're also working with a contract or an agreement with the county to provide defensive space inspections in the rescue area. So that's really what they're working on, the emphasis areas, as well as our vegetation management ordinance that's out there. One of the new things you'll see is you'll see a sign out there that's placed in their properties, and it says "Notice to destroy weeds." It's got my name on it. That's part of the law. Unfortunately, being the fire chief, apparently my name's got to be on stuff. So that is one of the things I wasn't super happy about, but my name's out there, so I get to be the bad guy. But at any rate, if you see those, that is absolutely part of that program, is to make sure that that sign's out there. What that does is it puts the resident on notice. It also gets all the other neighbors to let them know that we know that this is an issue and it's in progress. And so that's been tremendously helpful, but it's also increased business by a lot. The only other challenge that we are running into this year is with the county ordinance, with the recent fires, with everything that's going on. We're having a hard time, or the citizens are having a hard time finding contractors that will come out in a timely manner to take care of their properties. And if they do, the cost is just through the roof for them. And so we're working with them on that. We're looking at doing a master services agreement that might buy down that, if you will, so everybody's kind of grouped in, and maybe a company buy our bids on the entire package. That's kind of the things that we're looking at with that. But we understand that plight. We've had the same things with the properties that we are force abating. Trying to find a vendor to come out right now has been a challenge. We've noticed that, a couple that are right down the road here has just been a little bit of a challenge. We are working with folks, and so as long as they're making progress, we're going to work with them. We know it's tremendously expensive. We're going to work with them. You can't expect it to go from 0 to 100%, that first year. So we're flexible. If you're not working with us, if you're not communicating with us, yes, we're going all the way, and we will force abate that property. The last thing I have on that is some of our more rural areas are a little bit dangerous for our inspectors to go out to. So you have a quarter mile, half mile long driveway. Driving down somebody's driveway isn't always the safest, and people they have their guns and they have those things posted on signs and things like that. So we're sending our inspectors out 2 at a time, so they go together in teams. And if they come across those signs or things like that, we're simply marking it that we haven't, or we weren't able to access, but know that there's definitely a heightened risk to our folks by going out and doing those. And then lastly, we're going to consider other options as well, up to and including, body cameras. Some of our folks are getting accosted out there, and they're the brunt of it. And every single day they get it loud and clear. And sometimes people aren't very nice, and they threaten them. They use not so clean language. And so it's important to make sure that our folks are safe. Unless you have any more other questions, that is all I have. Yes.
Any little thing, right? Any little trigger is just seems over the top. So yeah, I understand the public safety, the security.
Right.
We've been concerned with county employees at the same time.
Yeah.
People are just more aggressive now.
Right.
Going on.
Chief, forgot to mention one great thing that happened to the department last Friday.
Did.
We had a
Oh, yes.
graduation ceremony for 5 new firefighter paramedics. So they went through the fire academy. They were all experienced firefighters in other parts of El Dorado County. They have joined the El Dorado Hills Fire Department. They seem like a tremendous group of individuals. I think the chief in his graduation speech said they were the A team of trainees. And so we're glad to have 5 more firefighter paramedics to serve the El Dorado Hills community. We're very happy about that.
And they're all local, which is and Tim is exactly right. Every one of them are from local or agencies in this county, already accredited. So their academy was very easy for us. Unfortunately, it creates a hole in some of those other agencies, but that's kind of where we're at.
I remember years ago discussions were losing the best.
Right. Exactly.
It's a food chain, right? You have to move around.
Right.
Just have to understand that's part of it. You never want to be on that very lowest rung.
Right.
Doing all the training and people leave
Yes.
on a regular basis. We have some areas of the county that are operating.
I say keep it going.
Yeah,
It's working well for us.
And
And I think what I'm hearing too is there's fewer people really interested in entering the fire service today, like it is in law enforcement, because the feeling that some of the public, and I'm talking nationwide in Cal, not necessarily El Dorado County or locally, but there's just fewer people that want to get into that public service profession because they're concerned with, well, am I going to have the backing when I need it to, to step up and do the things I need to do? And fire is not unsimilar or dissimilar then to law enforcement in the same kind of capacity, because nobody likes to be the bad person. And you're doing things like vegetation management, code enforcement, whatever it is, it goes with the territory.
We're absolutely seeing that across the board. And I sit on a couple different groups statewide. Everybody has the same problem. It doesn't matter what you're paying. It doesn't matter what your benefits are. Right? It is just this moment in time where folks are rediscovering things, and maybe the fire service isn't for them. And so where we used to be able to have 10,000 folks wrapped around a building waiting for days to apply for a job, we don't get that anymore. And so even El Dorado Hills, which we've got a great community, great equipment, our folks are compensated well, and we have a hard time recruiting. And so when you look at wanting to hire 6 new firefighters, we were only able to get 5. And that's from about 28 applications. And so when you look at 28 applications, that's abysmal. That's nothing at all for 6 positions. But it's not just us. You look down at Sacramento Fire Department, they've got 85 open positions right now. You've got Metro Fire, they're browning stations out because they don't have enough staffing. I was down in Southern California, and you look at Orange County Fire Authority, you look at all of the San Ramon Valley Fire, they're all struggling to get people through the door. A lot of it has to do with just not having dual income families, and they can pick and choose where they want to go. Everybody is stealing from each other personnel wise, and you've got choices. And then the final piece is, if I can make more money other places and not have to work as hard, why wouldn't I do that? If I can telecommute doing something different, why would I work that hard, get all that time away from your family when I can do something different? That's what we're experiencing.
Yeah, so it's a competitive market. Yeah, sad to hear that, but like everything, it's changing. It's constant flux. So hopefully it turns around and people are more interested in getting back in the fire service in particular, because during the fire season, that's where you don't want to be shorthanded, right? And I think the state, from what I've heard, CAL FIRE is shorthanded too. They've not been able to get all the crews they wanted. So our resilience to fire events and stuff is not as good probably this year as it was last year. And yet the risk is probably higher of more severe fire. So
that's one of the things they're seeing too, is on these large fires, they basically create an entire city to run that fire. They're struggling trying to find logistics folks. They're struggling trying to find porta potty companies that come in, caterers trying to come in. And remember that the inmate population has dramatically been slashed. They typically provide some of the food at the MKUs, and we just don't have the people. So they're trying to get creative to even staff these fires with, how do you get water? How do you get ice? How do you get food to the firefighters? Otherwise, the firefighters are going to stop going to the incidents. And so, yeah, absolutely.
Have those normal resources available. Wow, I didn't realize it was getting that bad. So, okay, well, thank you again, Chief, for filling in for Chief Lilly and stuff. Appreciate the update. Any questions on our fire service, anyone? All right, not seeing any hands raised or anything else. Let's go ahead and start on this end, and we'll kind of work through, and I'll pick up the stuff that's left over. So, John.
Grab your microphone.
Yeah, on the agenda we have.
Why don't you turn your microphone on? Yeah. People can hear you a little better.
There's a lot of projects that we've had recently, staff that general plan limited to 20 years projection out, but we're seeing projects, especially down south patrol and so forth, where we see some long-term issues with access to highway 50 and so forth. So we're having a conversation with DOT. I think the board, Raphael is talking to the board of supervisors about that, John.
Yep.
About, and of course that would be a general plan update, to maybe look at some more long range projections and because, technically they can't require the developers to mitigate those longer range type impacts, which we know are going to happen. And they're limited to that 20-year window. So with that, it also lists, which I'll ask Supervisor Hyde, I'll address, because he actually wrote these items down, so I'll give him credit, is the long-term financial issues associated with that as well. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, obviously, infrastructure has ever increasing costs. And so it comes down to things as simple as road maintenance. That's not building new infrastructure. It's not a capital improvement. It's just maintaining what we have, right? And what we're seeing from DOT is it takes $6 million a year of additional funding over what we had last year just to sustain. And the Board of Supervisors were able to identify $3 million of additional funding that we took out of the budget, put in the 2021-2022 budget to go to DOT specifically for road maintenance, but it's half what's needed. So that need continues to grow. Some of you may have heard or seen things that the governor's now saying he wants to increase the gas tax because we're not making enough money to pay for everything. And my answer was no. The state's collecting enough money. It's not going to the right places. It's not putting asphalt down where it belongs. It's funding staff and other things that are not as important to most of the public, but that's where the money's going. So he's talking about potential tax increases at that level. I don't know that anybody's really getting behind that, but we were kind of snookered with SB1 in terms of promises of what was going to happen, and then it didn't. We got roughly half the money we expected at the county from initial estimates and stuff. So as John mentioned, Rafael Martinez, our Director of Transportation, is working on a presentation package that my understanding will be probably sometime in August when he brings that forward to really talk again about what's the immediate need for additional funding. The $3 million deficit he's looking at this year just rolls over and grows next year. And so we have to find another revenue source, or we're just going to have to decide we're not going to maintain these roads. In some of the more rural areas is where I think you start. You have to look at ADT, where's the highest traffic levels, and where you don't have high traffic levels, then you're not going to be able to do as much maintenance. And the roads are already in bad shape. So the only solution I know is you go to gravel. And that's not the solution people want from a standpoint of property values or safety of the speed you can travel or anything else. But when you can't afford the cost of asphalt rolling machines, I mean, that's the lower cost alternative. And there are states that have implemented a lot of very well done gravel roads, but they tend to be in drier areas. And El Dorado County, in a normal year, tends to receive a lot more precipitation than a lot of other parts of California or other states. So I'm not sure how workable that is. But so he will be, Rafael will be presenting things. There's two things he's primarily focusing on. One is a sales tax measure, where that sales tax would be dedicated entirely to road maintenance. And we had talked about that before. And it's a difficult situation because nobody wants to pay more in taxes. But if we put forward the assurances that it's going to go only for road maintenance, and if we have an advisory committee, which we want to do, made up of public members and stuff, so people know that the money is really being spent where it's intended to be spent, then maybe that's something through education, other stuff has a chance. But the other area is TOT, transient occupancy tax. And so there's some things that we have some flexibility on those discretionary funds to shift perhaps some additional monies over, but that means we have to have a growing economy. Because TOT is really the hotel tax, if you will, and campground tax. And the county has looked at, do we need to start establishing TOT tax for campground usage, where it's not a cabin, a yurt, or whatever you're using. It's actually just the campsite. So we have a TOT tax. And I'm not in favor of those kinds of things, because I think there should be a very affordable way to go ahead and have fun in the outdoors and go to a campsite without having to pay all the additional taxes. But again, what do you do when you can't maintain your roads? So those conversations will continue, and hopefully we'll find some answers. But the cost of doing the work isn't going down. That's obvious. Every time we go out with new estimates, it seems like the projects as proposed are costing a lot more money. We find ways sometimes to take scope out of the project and reduce the cost, but then you always wonder, well, did we really get as much out of it as we should have? Is the quality all there? All those kinds of things. So it's a balancing act, but it's unfortunate that the state hasn't made good on providing the funding they're supposed to for road maintenance. That's the state's responsibility. And they have not done that, at least in El Dorado County, and left us with huge deficits. So I'm not in favor of increasing taxes, but sooner or later you have to look at what is the alternative. So we'll face that. But anything else you wanted to wrap up with?
We're gonna finally deliberate on Central El Dorado Hills, probably September. We're hoping, praying.
Yeah.
And Costco's in the door, so.
Okay, so questions of John, anybody, leadership team?
Well, I'll go real quick. I know that you've raised it at the planning commission and other planning commissions have raised the observations that when you're looking at a 20-year project with a 20-year development agreement, and you're talking about finding some improvements, you know, the cost in 2021 is going to be significantly less than it's going to be 10, 5, 20 years out. And a lot of times, I know there are some cost escalators built into it, but when it comes time to actually fund and build these things, you know, that's when the public goes, well, why didn't that get happen? You know,
Well,
why
yeah,
did
as
this?
an example, Promontory, you know, Sophia Parkway, that whole,
Yeah.
like a mile of, they graded it out.
Yeah.
But we would have been wise to, you know, work out with AKT a reimbursement agreement and pay that whole thing out. Because if we, which I believe, and I think the linchpin is gonna be the Empire Ranch interchange. When that opens up, I think it's gonna change a lot of things on Sophia and Empire Ranch, as well as
Right.
South County.
But that's a Folsom City project.
Yes.
Caltrans, it's not, yeah, it's not El Dorado
It's
County, so
gonna
yes.
affect us, as well as the Empire Ranch development. As well. And so, and thankfully the board had the wisdom on Saratoga, at least the frontage, along the frontage to get that done. But I know there's talk about getting the rest of Saratoga to 4 lanes, but I was told recently they have not even done the environmental work yet.
It's on the CIP, but yeah.
Right. So, so it's not as though they could just get a contract together. They got to go through the environmental
In design, right?
They've got the design.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah, they've got the design. They've had it for some time, but because we all see what's going on in Saratoga. But that's all I have at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Any questions from our Zoom attendees? I'm not seeing any hands raised, so.
One thing on
Yeah, Chief.
Saratoga, I know, just looking at next door and some of those, there's lots of comments about the Starbucks over there and just the parking situation exiting out of that drive-through. And so we haven't had any accidents that I can see, but certainly a lot of close calls over there. But something to think about moving forward and some of those as they're approved in tight situations like that. Internally in the parking lot itself, exactly.
Well, we talked about that at APAC about the, you know, the circulation element of that project when it was the Chick-fil-A.
Right.
And why we opposed it or we didn't support it. And I was a little disheartened because, you know, the community actually drove that process, talking with the developer and got him to change the project. I was disheartened that they went for another drive-through and they complained that the drive-through was a problem. It's not unexpected. I mean, the Starbucks over off of like Cambridge and Green Valley Road,
Right.
it circles through that whole shopping center in the mornings, and sometimes as late as 11 in the morning or up till noon. Yeah, plus the alignment of Saratoga as it, or where it comes around those curves and what the future limitations are going to be over there. You know, they're eliminating left out on, I can never remember the name of that road. Well, they're eliminating a left out on one of those.
Not Arrowhead.
Yeah, and APAC will, yeah, it goes back towards the offices back there. But we're hosting a meeting for the community. It's not an APAC meeting. We're just providing the virtual facility for those residents along Saratoga. Finders, where the big concern is with DOT on August 19th. I'm trying to remember. And it will be a virtual meeting. I would encourage anybody that's interested in transportation concerns in the county to attend, because, you know, it's specific to that location and that neighborhood and those groups of residents, but it would probably be applicable to any place in the county about why things happen the way they happen and why they can't do the things that they can't do.
Thank you.
Mammoth.
Mammoth.
That took a lot of brain power, sorry about that.
There was a lot of discussion over what that
Yeah.
small restricted area could accommodate. Thank goodness the Chick-fil-A didn't get
Oh my
approved in
God.
there because
Not even imagine.
it'd be a parking lot. I mean, you might as well, like, you're gonna go to some big box Home Depot or something, really. You might as well just go in the parking lot and sit because it doesn't work there. So the circulation was a problem. There was a lot of things, but like John said, ultimately, the group that was threatening the lawsuit and stuff decided that they were allowing other fast food in that area, not recognizing, I guess, the amount of traffic. But it's one of those
Even like
things you
the-
learn incrementally.
And that's why I bring it up, just for future. They might say this is what we're going to do, but it actually comes out a little bit different. Even the RV parking, you're not putting an RV in that parking spot.
Well, we talked about that for 3 months.
Any RV. Yeah.
About, what the original requirement was that they had waived that.
Right.
Original design review, and now they're amending it. It's like, now you need it, but yeah, you're not getting a fire engine in there either.
Certainly not getting
So
a
they're
fire
not picking
engine.
anything up.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
It was,
oh my gosh.
it was Habit Burger and Chick-fil-A, yeah.
Oh, what a mess.
So I think the planning commission made a lot better project.
Yes.
But they also, the pedestrian sidewalk, they got rid of that and where they were gonna take them to the parking lot.
Yeah.
And we got that changed. So no, we're gonna put a sidewalk along, because people walk along the road. We're not gonna go to the parking lot. So from where it started, it got a lot better. But yeah, it's, I think a lot of people in the county were taken off guard in respect to the amount of traffic. I wasn't necessarily, but a lot of people were in respect to the level of traffic. So here we are.
Yeah, and it's a matter of, you plan for it, but do you have the analysis right? Because things change with.
Well, the other thing I'll mention, Saratoga was originally planned to be 4 lanes all the way down to Elroy Boulevard. Then in the wisdom, with DOT's recommendation, it got restricted to 2 lanes once the Wilson cutoff goes. Should have been 4 lanes all the way down.
Wisdom?
That's what I had to.
Agreed.
It didn't happen. And the argument was, well, we're not going to need it. It's just added maintenance. And so why do wrong. So I think one of the things I've learned is that there's an educational process that's necessary for county DOT employees to understand that El Dorado Hills is a lot different than a lot of other areas of the county.
Yeah.
And particularly when you're tied close to Folsom,
That
that
especially, yeah.
huge impact of
Right.
Folsom and Folsom Ranch is going in. And there's a whole lot, and whether you talk about White Rock Road or wherever you talk about in that region, we just haven't thought through what it takes to do long range planning for that kind of infrastructure.
Right. And even Saratoga is doing exactly what we all thought it would do. And it's a quick route right down to Folsom. So when you look at through 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, traffic is backing up to make that left turn on the Saratoga to get down to Folsom, and it's starting to impact traffic all the way down El Dorado Boulevard.
It is.
All the way through the interchange. And so we
Passes the
find
road,
safety issues and people blocking the road, hard stops because they're all trying to race to get through that turn lane and there's only one
Right.
turn.
It all went through traffic analysis,
Gotcha.
environmental review and challenges, and they were wrong. I don't know what to tell you. They were wrong. So we need to recalibrate somehow.
If you recall, the developer, he was willing to do it. I think it was gonna cost, if he had all the machinery there, it would have been $825,000
Yeah.
to put in.
It was.
Right.
Now, I guarantee you, if you're gonna have to go 4 lanes, it's gonna cost $2 million or more.
Yeah.
And the developer would have done it. But like you said, DOT said, no, we don't want to maintain the roads before we need the extra capacity. I mean, like short-sighted.
Even on the Southeast Capitol Connector, they did the design work for the county. The county contributed some funds, and so the county got a lot more out of it than the funds that we put into it. But they designed it with landscaping and the median, and the DOT said we can't maintain that. So take that out. We can't have that. Just make it concrete. So and another example, that's a busy intersection over here at Bass Lake and Silver Springs, which is done and it's great and it's a big improvement. But there's a bike lane when you turn onto Bass Lake Road. That's just bike lane starts, and about 70 feet later, bike lane ends.
Yeah.
And about 400 feet from where the sidewalk is in that new project, it's ADA compliant. We have a sidewalk inside of our neighborhood that would have completed a lake connectivity, but who's going to pay for it?
That's why LLADs are formed. But
Let's
not
not talk-
everybody's happy with LLADs.
I have an LAD vote next Friday. Let's not talk about that.
Let's don't go there. All right.
But DOT, not to take all the time on this topic, but DOT, we have to start thinking about long range impacts. One of the issues the fire department has is DOT will make decisions on homes in an area, but they're only looking at it for that one home. But when you start to look at one home this year, 5 the next year, 3 or 4 here, all of a sudden you have this subdivision in an area that's very rural, in a 12 to 16 foot wide road that we can't get past. And so that is absolutely one of the concerns we have, is when you start to approve some of these road projects, we have to be in sync, because we're going to have to start talking about not allowing homes to be built unless the roadways are widened to the standard spec.
All the
Even
subdivisions you
after-
guys get to review. So you're talking about the small 4x4 incremental
Yes, exactly.
cumulative thing that, yeah.
It turns into a development, a neighborhood.
When we meet, let's talk about that.
Definitely.
I also want to talk about gated communities and using them as secondary access points.
Sure.
That's the primary reason I want to talk about that.
Put it on the list.
Now that you talk about Sarasota, let's take those lessons, because I think you're gonna have a huge issue with cost.
Yes.
You know, I would recognize the economic development, that would be, I know some people before, some will be against it. But right now, the infrastructure investment that you're gonna have to make, and for that little cutoff and the connection coming up from, Priscilla, from.
Clarksville Crossing.
Yeah.
Costco, yeah.
There's a roadway that goes underneath the freeway.
Yeah, it's just, it won't work. And if you get the type of traffic that they expect, 40,000 plus Costco member, they think you're gonna go start shopping there rather than going to Folsom. I just see that unless DOT planning, the board is thinking creatively and forward thinking, you're gonna have traffic jams starting on day one that will never go away. Because that's a very.
That's why traffic circles fit into some of those designs, but
That road is,
I'm gonna have to go design it, I guess.
that road's encumbered by Highway 50 going over it, so
Right.
it's a couple nickels to put in to change an overpass. I mean, that's a lot of dollars.
So
So
we've had long-term issues with that. And an old example is Lake Hill Drive that backs up the water, where normally you would get at least a paved shoulder along there. Now, I'm the author of that 8-foot shoulder by Lake Hills Court. I had that put in with a parcel map right there. I wish I would have maybe done a 4-foot shoulder and horse trade with them to go down to Bonita
Got it.
instead of an 8-foot
Right,
shoulder.
right.
But you've got the painted edge line and you've got dirt. And with a major subdivision like Waterford, you could easily put it into 4-foot shoulders there.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people walk and ride their bikes there.
Sure.
And so, lots of opportunity, for major developments that it wouldn't bad now.
Well, we've got an opportunity right now. I mean, we need to go into Costco eyes wide open, because it's not just Costco. When Costco comes, everything else will as well.
Right with it. Yep.
We'll have double or quadruple.
Across the street.
Exactly.
What they want to do as well.
Right.
Valley Parkway will change dramatically.
Absolutely.
About the White Rock Road connections and everything else. So, yeah, and I don't want to beat up on DOT. Obviously, I think they're doing their best in
Oh, yeah.
planning, but you've got to get beyond the limited visibility, the myopic view that we've taken on things, and start looking at the bigger picture.
Well, culturally,
So,
the county overall is very rural, but we're approving a very suburban community here, and we have rural roads.
right. Yeah. So, Mo, if there's a list of specific areas like the ones you talked about, please let me know what they are. Because I'd like to know where you think the hot spots are from these little small developments, because I don't typically see those things. If it isn't a subdivision review, I'm not aware of it unless it's happening next to where I live.
Yep. Absolutely, we can do that. We've actually sat down with DOT and hopefully to try to open their eyes in the long-term effects of some of these decisions that are being made.
Most of the Bass Lake area.
Is Bass Lake all the way out to Dorado Ridge, which is really more of a 10-foot wide road. You're not going to get anybody past you. We had the fire that went up Valley View up there, Screech Owl. That one scares me. We can't get people by you with everybody trying to get out. And then lastly, down in off of South Shingle on the other side, on the west side, if you will, I'm trying to Settlers Trail. That's the one where we're talking about. You've got a very narrow bridge, a school right on the other side of that, and now you have a couple hundred homes that are out there that have organically, a couple here, a couple there. Well, the roads were never improved. And so now you have the 40-acre parcels that are looking to split multiple ways at Rancho Victoria down there. We have to make them for it. We have to tell them they've got to expand the roads down there. They're not having that. Exactly. Yes. We did, but it was definitely a tense negotiation. People aren't happy, and we've got to do something with the bridge and those things in those areas.
Work together.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know the date and time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay.
Sounds good. All right, thank you. So let's move past infrastructure and let's jump to healthy communities.
Okay.
I just had the school reopening thing, which I covered, but you probably have a lot of other stuff. So.
Okay, so hi, everybody. He stole my thunder there. The California HHS Secretary, Dr. Galley, did announce that when schools reopen in the fall, they are going to require that students from K through 12 wear masks. This is the plan as of now. They're not going to be requiring social distancing, and the rationale they said was that it would be too complicated to allow schools to fully open if they had the social distancing component. They are going to still offer free COVID testing. And so far, they're also saying that they're not going to require any vaccines for school children. However, in a similar the same conversation, Dr. Galley also discussed how California is at a 62% approximate herd immunity, and that if the 12-year-olds plus are approved for vaccination, they think that would increase in California to 75 to 80% herd immunity. So I don't know if they're eyeing the idea or not of forced vaccinations. I hope not. The CDC is recommending now that students and teachers, they're saying that you don't need to wear a mask if you're vaccinated. So we're kind of going against CDC here in California. So, and then the advisory committee for the CDC is looking at approving the 2-dose vaccines for 12-year-olds plus. There's a lot of concern with myocarditis as a heart inflammation. The numbers on the vaccine adverse effects, VAERS system is showing some concern there, and people are starting to talk about that a little more. The Delta variant, it's infectious, but it's not as lethal. So that's spreading mostly in areas around the world that don't have a lot of vaccinations. And then some things going on right now, US officials are saying that, nearly all the COVID hospitalizations and deaths are amongst unvaccinated people. Infection in vaccinated people is producing less virus. So did you know this? Studies are bearing out that if you're vaccinated and you do get infected, you're creating less virus in your body and you're less likely to pass on the infection. Breakthrough infections are rare. They're just saying 75% of deaths and hospitalizations right now in the US are people over 65. And that's something that Supervisor Huddle was saying, that there's places you do still have to wear masks, public transport, transit, airports, healthcare facilities. And pretty much that's it. I think most people know where to get a vaccine now. It's pretty available. And yeah, I want to keep it short and quick, short and sweet.
So what are you hearing about, people who've had COVID, they have the antibodies, the natural immunity, that versus vaccination? Because I'm reading a lot of different stuff.
I know.
I don't know what to believe.
I know. It's hard. I could do a deeper dive into it, but I've heard some promising scientists talk about how they think it's a pretty substantial immunity if you have been infected. And right now, the kind of concept of vaccine passports, they don't really offer a passport for those who have antibodies, which is kind of ridiculous. So,
yeah, I agree.
So hopefully they can kind of dial down on a consensus on that. And you know, I think, yeah, so. yeah.
Do they include that in the herd immunity number? I suspect they don't,
I don't think they
which
do.
I think is ridiculous too.
I
So
don't think they do.
it's hard to tell where we're going to go with all this. And
Yeah.
the one thing I'm pulling away from it is it appears that we're now going to have an annual second type of flu bug, no matter what you want to call it, whether it's coronavirus 20 or whatever. This is something that's going to be continuing
Well, and the hope,
in a different form.
yes, the hope with that is that as the variants come out, this is kind of the theory is, you know, so for the Delta, for example, it's highly infectious, but it's less lethal. So the very lethal strains kill people off. I hope to say that, but kill people off. So that virus kind of dissipates a little bit more quickly. And the ones that are kind of weaker viruses linger around because people get infected and then it's really transmissible. So they pass it, they recover, they might get it again. You know, that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, so we're not out of it yet. It's liable to continue for some time. We'll just have to continue to see what happens. But I think that's occupied, you know, most of healthy community discussions. There's a lot of other things with healthy communities, opioid addiction, and a lot of other stuff.
I'm digging into that a lot more too. So I'll be reporting out more of the opioid and mental health situations going on in our county and in the state as well.
The drug problem is something that we have to really deal with, and it's all over the place. It's not just opioids, it's all kinds of drugs. And so that's a continuing battle too, to get to the healthy communities part. So yeah, more to come on that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Feature that in some future
Yeah, actually, I
meetings.
have a bunch, I don't want to rattle off. There's a bunch of stuff. I was speaking with the
Right.
coalition, so I'll bring that next month. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So with that, let's jump to APAC, and then I'll pick up the missing stuff to the extent it makes sense.
Okay, so our meeting was scheduled for this Wednesday. It has been canceled basically because there's not enough project status updates that would necessitate us all getting together in a room or setting up a Zoom session. Last month, our last meeting, we did go ahead. We had our subcommittee provide their findings on the second recirculated draft environmental impact report for the Central El Dorado Hills specific plan, and we did provide our comments on that. Essentially, you know, if you want to, it's available on the APAC website. But basically, you know, the project that was proposed before is still the project that's being considered now. The project alternatives are just two new proposed alternatives. If those were to come into play, they would actually essentially be starting from scratch and redoing all the environmental, and they've stated that is not their desire to do. But we did recognize that alternative one, which is no project, and alternative four, which is a zoning consistent alternative that goes along with the recreational facility zoning that's in place right now, that those are, you know, pretty close to what the community has expressed, well, since 2012 when the project first started, 2015 when the environmental documents started circulating, and what the 2015 advisory vote represented with the 91% of the community that voted in favor of keeping the zoning in place and not wanting to rezone it. So we did recognize that in our comments, and we did point out a few of the items. Essentially was that there's a lot of assumptions on the zoning consistent alternative that you know, there's some facilities that could go along with the recreational facility zoning if they did like a top golf or a aquatic facility or tennis, whatever it may be, that there are existing height restrictions for that zoning, that perhaps a hotel, which they said is possible with it, might not, you know, they're suggesting it's not necessarily by right, but that's a simple, you know, conditional use permit or a special use permit. And, you know, we, you know, being non-professionals, we'd like that explained a little bit more if that ever were to come into fruition. So we did that. We talked about the Carson Creek specific plan amendment, which was heard before the Planning Commission and was denied, or not supported, but that was the Planning Commission recommendation. And then we did hear about our White Rock Road noise study subcommittee report. They provided a little more information. And the last thing we have was that I did talk to the real estate folks at Costco and basically said, you know, their application is in at the county. We can't see it because it's not posted on Legistar, or not Legistar, but on Track It, and that he would reach out to us when the time was right. And you know, there's a lot of considerations. They're working with a partner with EDH 52. So there's a lot of moving pieces of that picture. So our next meeting is going to be in August, and I believe it's the 11th, if I'm looking correctly here. But basically, you know, we're as volunteers working on these projects, these things have enormous lead times. Central is 2012. We're waiting on Central. We're waiting on the Carson Creek Village specific plan. They haven't talked about a notice for their draft environmental impact report yet. We're waiting for the draft environmental impact report on Creekside Village. I've heard from the Wind folk a few times over the last few months that they want to come back and talk about what the impact is of the 50-acre park land dedication from parts of their project that they own, that the CSD is purchasing 50 acres. It's changing their project a little bit. So he indicated that they weren't ready to do that this month. We're still waiting on the villages at Town Center West, which is a mixed use. We're waiting on, well, a lot of different things. But one thing that I heard from the Mohana family over the weekend, and that their pre-application is in for the Town and Country Village, El Dorado.
Yep.
2 hotels.
That was supposed to go in last Friday, but it sounds like it went in. So
It's in. It's on the APAC website now. They do want to come and talk to us at APAC about that pre-application. We've talked to them twice already. They've been doing a tremendous amount of outreach in the community, not just through APAC, but also through Bass Lake Neighbors. The Bass Lake Action Committee's had some input, and just a lot of neighbors, property owners in the area. A lot of people are like, how can you put that commercial thing right there right next to the freeway? Well, it's right next to the freeway. Right. But they are talking about some elements that would be.
Where else would you put it?
Well,
Where else would you want to put it?
you know, when we talk about cost on their fuel station or EDH 52, the original proposal was for 3 gas stations. And the people who live right above it, there's like, well, I really don't want a gas station right next to me, but you put gas stations next to the highway because you don't want those people driving in your neighborhood. So, but the Town and Country Village, El Dorado, they're talking about the 2 hotel buildings. They're talking about preserving and creating a lot of pedestrian and bicycle paths, taking advantage of a lot of historical wagon trails and elements in the area. They are talking about some residential aspects of this, 20 dwelling units per acre for both. Some cottages.
So they're proposing mixed use, which is the new term for this project. It wasn't out there before. So
yeah, they have some townhomes, some cottages. Right. The thing about the pre-app, and Tim and I talked about it a little bit, is that really there's a lot of detail there, but not a lot of detail there. It's a pre-application, so they're going to get that feedback from the board. They've asked to come to talk to us in August. If unless there's not other updates to provide, we may not have a meeting in August either, but they're very eager to talk to us again. So those are the things that we're waiting on. And again, any project that's proposed, immediately you hear from people who don't want it to happen. And they contact APAC. I've had like 4 or 5 in the last week. How do we stop this? Well, APAC is not about stopping anything, and it's not about approving anything. It's about, this is a project. We're providing resident feedback. Here are our concerns. We're not experts. Can we address this? Can we get to a better project that's better for the community, better for the county, and better for the applicant? So, we don't want to stray into advocacy for or against. So, hopefully, we'll be seeing everybody in August. Still no word from the CSD about what we can do with the pavilion. So, we'll figure out what we're going to do.
Post here anytime you want.
Okay, I'm gonna write, that's recorded.
thank you.
I truly mean it.
Well, but we will.
Staff doesn't tell us that. No.
If it comes to that, we would be very gracious. I mean,
yeah. We could host here or down at the EDC.
Yeah, we've done it here before in the past for bigger meetings, so we appreciate that offer and expect my phone call. So that's it.
Okay.
Copy that.
2 elements I'll mention that John didn't cover. One is they're looking at workforce housing on site.
Yeah.
They really want the staff that works in the hotels to be able to
Love it.
force it, but they're able to.
Yep.
We're talking about cottages and those kinds of things, keep the cost down. And so I think that's an incredible concept where you actually create the village again, where people who work in the village actually live in the village as opposed to commuting. The other thing they've done is they've added a 40-acre parcel that's immediately to the east along the old Country Club Drive. So it'll be north of the old Country Club Drive and east of their project. So there's 40 acres that they've entered into a partnership. They want to put in a memorial park as part of that, and big Oak Woodlands area. So that's going to be developed, and there's some housing included in that. So the footprint of the project has grown a little bit in that one segment, but a lot of the concepts have evolved. They are going to have a rezoning. They had originally talked about tourist and recreational. That doesn't seem to fit too well, so it's going to be mixed use, commercial. Not quite sure exactly what kind of commercial. And then they're probably just those two is my guess, but we haven't gotten through the complete list.
The pre-app indicates, obviously there's an amendment to the Bass Lake Hill specific plan, which it's in the plan area. It's a zoning change and a general plan amendment.
Yep.
So
it's a pretty big hurdle, which is why they have the J6, the conceptual review before the board.
And having seen those drawings and the conceptual elements many times, I know it's going to be, if they were to build it just today, it'd be fabulous because that's what they do. But when neighbors in the area see sort of the scope of the building, so they're very tall. But again, it's right next to the highway, so we will see.
Very good. Thank you for the report. Any questions of John?
That's John. Which,
John.
That John.
Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and pick up some of the loose ends here. Community information and outreach. I don't think Cindy did an update of what she usually puts out, and since she's recovering from her surgery, I'm not sure that's going to happen this month. There's one major event coming up. I want everybody to get on their calendar right now. That's our El Dorado County Fair. It will start Thursday, September 23rd and run through Sunday, September 26th. And we are going to have a booth there wherein Pioneer Community Energy will be hosting the booth to answer questions that people may have about how is it going to affect if I got my solar and PG&E, and how's that going to affect the various things that are going on, the phasing that will occur. And I'm planning on being at the booth for part of the time at least to greet people and to be able to answer questions since I'm on their board now. But I think that's a real opportunity to have Pioneer to kind of join our community at the county fair and get to meet people and kind of start the dialogue a little bit better than just press release, right? Because that's what we've been doing to date.
They were at the El Dorado Hill CSD Board of Directors meeting last Thursday. It was a pretty good presentation. They did a hybrid meeting, so they do both. And I, cornered them in the parking lot as they were leaving. I figured they would be at the community council soon, but they're looking for any opportunity to get out in front of the public to talk about how this is going to work. People that want to opt out, what happens if you want to opt out and come back in? PG&E requires you to be, if you go back to PG&E, you got to be there for a year, things like that. And just sort of, what the projected cost savings are, but what sort of the fees are still from PG&E. So I imagine the community council, they would gladly take an invitation for that, but I'll go ahead and reach out to them as well. Because I think the more times people hear it, the more availability it is. Recorded meeting, people hear those questions from residents, and it's informative and it's important because this is coming at the end of the year.
Right. Well, January 2022 is when the eligibility really starts up, and there'll be a lot of information and packages put up. But I was thinking more like September, October. So, we don't get too far away from it because people forget very quickly. And then, so we'll have to figure out the timing, but I do intend to invite them to be one of our guest speakers. I've been through a lot of their presentations. They have some really good presentations. How much time you want to spend on it? Yeah.
Is there going to be a more concerted effort with Pioneer to do more outreach? I've actually been pretty shocked at how many folks have no idea this is coming.
That's what they said at the CSD meeting, is that they're very engaged. They want to be engaged and they want to talk to as many people as they can.
Right.
We're very limited media wise. Sure.
So we're pushing social media. We told them they got to get on Nextdoor. They got to start doing that. We can use my Nextdoor, but they need to get their own agency account, and then they need to be on Facebook, which they have a Facebook account, but they need to start spreading the word out here with what's going on. But in addition to that, our Director of Communications is pushing press releases and trying to get that stuff. So hopefully some more newspaper articles and okay, good. Because they're energized now. They have a consulting contract person, a contract agency that does their PR, and they're excited about getting El Dorado County and the city of Placerville really to be part of the community of Pioneer. So I think they'll do a good job of it from what I've seen, but it's just now starting to ramp up a little bit. A lot of work to be done. Yep. So with that, I'm going to jump up to economic development. I had on here the industrial hemp analysis. For some of you who may not know, the Board of Supervisors was asked to consider a special project wherein UC Davis wanted to run a pilot program to grow some industrial hemp where they were going to interplant industrial hemp between grapevines to determine what is the impact of hemp on grapes, because there's been reports that have been put out that particularly for thin-skinned grapes, that you can pick up a flavor, odor, or whatever associated with hemp migrating across the skin membrane into the grape. And I think it's more with white wines and reds, but this was going to be an opportunity to have a controlled experiment, so to speak, in El Dorado County and run it. It just couldn't happen because of too many other constraints. So that's been pushed off. But one of the things the Board of Supervisors did was to say, well, we want to get more inputs from our Ag Commission on the growing of industrial hemp and also from CDAC. Because we have done an analysis at the county looking at what is the economic benefits, but that was before, that was primarily on cannabis. It wasn't hemp. Hemp is a different product. It's the same plant, but a different product. CBD, CBG oils, various things. You can make rope out of it. It seems to be that the health market is what's driving a lot of the industrial hemp production now. So we asked CDAC to take a look at it and understand it from both the community aspect, but also the economic aspect. What do we need to set in an ordinance to allow industrial hemp to happen? We started with industrial hemp without an ordinance. Our Ag Commissioner decided, since it was legal in the state, we'll just go ahead and start working things, and that probably was not a well-informed decision because we had complaints from people. And a lot of things started happening because we didn't have an ordinance, no controls. It's just kind of a random event. So we're trying to bring those controls into place. We talked about putting an ordinance in place. So right now we have a temporary ban, so that can't be grown. This year, having had 2 years of previous growing experience, but the year before last was the one that we had the most complaints on. So still working through that, but CDAC is going to help participate and look at the economic aspects of it as well. There's finding out crazy things that there's things like energy credits that are available if you grow hemp. So now you can sell those credits, right? So to developers and stuff. So I'm not sure how many different people are getting their fingers in these different pieces of pie, but there seems to be a lot of government things happening with various products. So I'm going to leave that then. So are there any questions on the economic development part, industrial hemp? Because we'll get you more of it. Glenn's just coming up to speed with it. They've had one meeting. I wasn't able to listen in. Since he's not here tonight, I can't report for him, but I'm sure he'll report the next meeting then, and we'll get more updates on it. I don't know of any industrial hemp growing proposals in El Dorado Hills. They're all obviously in the more rural part of the county. That doesn't say we couldn't have an isolated area where somebody decides if this is the product they want to grow and they think it's marketable and they can make a profit on it, that they might do it. So because you're seeing this as kind of a boutique niche type of market right now with a lot of this stuff. So anyway, more to come on that. So I'm going to move now to the good governance. And we said, and Richard was with us earlier, he had another obligation, so he's not able to finish on this, but the unfunded state mandates for El Dorado County, and what I just said is who's going to pay for it? You are. So I'll answer the question right up front. All of us taxpayers get to pay for all the unfunded state mandates because it has to come out of the general fund. So we have collected money in terms of property tax and sales tax and goes into the general fund, but then we have to expend it for various things, including unfunded mandates. So I wanted to give you from a planning and building perspective, just a few of those things that are out there that are in place now and how this list is growing. Because as these lists of state mandates increase without funding, we have more and more staff time that has to be dedicated. And a lot of them say you can't charge any additional monies for these things, but you got to do the process faster. So speed it up, but you can't pay, we're not going to reimburse you for it. So it's the way the state is pushing things these days, but we get to pay for it, which means other services get cut. So with that, the current legislation in place, Government Code 65852.2 went into effect this January. It reduced the application review time for ADUs, which are accessory dwelling units, and JADUs, I'm not quite sure what that is, junior ADUs, thank you, from 120 days to 60 days. So now we have to cut the time in half to get these things done. If you don't get them done in 60 days, they're deemed approved. So automatic. So guess what they're doing? They're pushing to the point in rural areas and stuff where you don't have enough staff already, it's just going to become almost an automatic. No reviews, right? Because I'm not without adding staffing. That's got to come out of the general fund.
Any of them under 750 square feet or statutory.
Precludes collection of impact fees for ADUs less than 700 square feet by a local agency, special district, or water agency, or fire department, special district, right? Unless the accessory dwelling unit was constructed with a new single-family dwelling, that's the exception. For an accessory dwelling unit of 750 feet or more shall be charged proportionally in relation to the square footage of the primary dwelling unit. Then we have SB 35. SB 35 is basically taking multifamily units and affordable housing, and if they have meet certain qualifications for that affordable housing, then it becomes basically an ministerial type of approval. The Planning Commission, the Board of Supervisors can put very few conditions on it. The only conditions we can put on is things that might be in our general plan that would be deemed quantifiable standards. So we don't have a lot of those. So we got to rethink how we write these things, and that's a general plan amendment up to itself. So SB 35 will have significant impact on the demand for staff. Model water efficiently landscape ordinance. This is called MWELO. And for any of you that built new homes, the state basically said we have to restrict all the landscape watering, and it has to be monitored, and it has to be inspected. And so there's a whole lot of things that the county now has to do to review plans for that, and then to do the inspections. And again, we can't charge additional funds for that. It's all part of your building permit. Right.
Oh my God.
Send the complaint.
I was thinking the same thing going, I don't think they want you to do that.
Same thought.
Don't put that in the paper.
I'm not sure it was good advice, but
You're going to be quoted in the paper now. Yeah, like, it's great advice.
Oh, we do have, we have a lot of code enforcement stuff where we're having to go out and find problems like he's talking about.
Yeah.
People do stuff afterwards without getting building permits,
Yep.
without getting approval, and then you have to pay for it afterwards. And based upon a complaint or something or other, and that gets to be very expensive. So pay me now or pay me a whole lot more later. Unfortunately, that's the way the county operates. So increased national pollution discharge elimination system, permitting requirements, specifically new trash elimination requirements, electric vehicle charging station permit streamlining. So we now have to ramp up for all that. Vehicle miles traveled. We now have to have the ability to analyze the new state requirement related to CEQA and vehicle miles traveled, in addition to having in our general plan the requirement to look at level of service. So we always have to do level of service. We have to do VMT. Now, the good thing is the analysis of that is done by the developer through a CEQA contract. So, but then we have to review that and determine its suitability. Is it adequate? You know, so we have to educate our planning staff, DOT staff on VMT. So here's the ones that are really good. The pending legislation. And I hope I don't wear you out because I got 2.5 pages. I'm going to go quick, but this is going to give you an idea. SB 32, Building Decarbonization Bill. If passed, will require revisions to the general plan, additional planning and building permit requirements and review, which equals more staff time in the applicant to be put into effect by January 2023. So they give you a little bit of time. Senate Bill 478, minimum standards on floor area ratio and lot sizes. If passed, will require revisions to our zoning ordinance. AB 1401, prohibiting minimum parking requirements. If passed, will require revisions to our zoning ordinance. SB 477, if passed, will require additional reporting requirements related to cost standards and applications for proposed housing projects as part of our annual housing element submittal to HCD to be put into effect by January 2023. Takes more staff time, which takes more time away from other things. Senate Bill 12, retrofit strategy to reduce the risk of property loss and damage during wildfires. Would require revision to our housing element, updated 2024. SB 55, prohibition of creation or approval of new development in very high fire hazard severity zones, or SRA. Approximately 30% of the county fits into that category. Impacts RENA goals, economic development, and would require changes to our zoning ordinance. Title 14, fire safe regulations. Massive changes are pending that will apply to all new roads and driveways, as well as existing roads and driveways, involve parcel split, blah, 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 blah. AB 68, Housing Appeals Committee, would require the California Department of Housing and Community Development to establish a Housing Appeals Committee and would establish procedures by which applicants for a conditional use permit or other discretionary approval for a housing project could appeal to that committee a city or county's decision or any other either deny an application or approve an application with conditions in a manner rendering it infeasible for the development of the housing project. The bill would provide the committee would not have jurisdiction if the affected local agency has permitted construction or specified percentages, blah, 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 blah. AB 989, Housing Accountability Committee would establish a Housing Accountability Committee with an HCD responsible for reviewing appeals regarding multifamily housing projects, the city, so on and so forth. AB 780, School District Employee Housing would authorize the governing board of a school district to render a city or county zoning ordinance inapplicable if the proposed use of the property by the school district is to offer school district employee housing. AB 1075, Streamlined Housing Projects would require local government to deem a residential development compliant with its local zoning requirements if the proposed development is located on the site that meets specified requirements. AB 1370, Annual Report Requirements would require that the annual report include the total number of housing units that received a certificate of occupancy in the prior year. The bill would require this information to also specify the total number of housing units constructed that were approved pursuant to a specified streamlined ministerial approval process and the total number of accessory dwelling units, blah, 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 blah. The state wants more and more data so they can hire more and more people to review it. So they have the budget to hire more and more people, but we don't get to hire anybody else at the county because there's no money with this stuff, right? AB 803, Starter Home Revitalization Act of 2021 would authorize the development proponent to submit an application for the construction of a small home lot development as defined that meets specified criteria. The bill would require a small home lot development be located on a parcel that is no larger than 5 acres, is substantially surrounded by qualified urban uses as defined in the zone for multifamily residential, on and on and on. AB 1016, the last one, Streamlined Housing Projects would authorize a development proponent to submit for approval and require a local government to approve a housing development as specified pursuant to a streamlined ministerial process if it meets certain objective planning standards, including that the development be built or developed by a qualified nonprofit corporation and have 25 or fewer units. So it's clear what the state is trying to do is take away local control of housing from the state, from the counties, from the cities. And the more of this legislation that gets approved and signed by the governor, it just all flows down. It's a demand on staff time. And so what I've seen in the last 4.5 years is we've probably effectively lost 10 to 15% of our staff time just addressing these new mandates. And now there's another load coming, right? So they just continue to come. So it's discouraging from the standpoint of how do we pay for it? And it means other things have to be cut back ultimately because the state's driving all this stuff. So that's it relative to that news. Sorry to be the bearer of some bad news, but it's all driven by decisions that are made that we need more housing and everybody has to participate. And so I've taken the objective of we need to try to define what housing we can approve and where it goes before they take away the right to approve anything. Because then it's wherever the state wants, whatever the school districts want, they just have it, right? So we need to plan out better and I think implement the things that we want to see done that make sense and go from there. So any questions on any of that? I'd be happy to send this to you if you want. You probably don't want it. This will confuse everybody. So I'll just, any go backs for anybody on the leadership team, anything we might have skipped over?
My go back every month for the last couple of months has
Yeah.
been the El Dorado Hills Monument sign.
Yes.
Our volunteer group is looking for funding to structurally repair the sign that's falling apart. We've repainted it, the letters. We're about 62% of our $10,000 goal. If you have any friends or businesses are hit hard right now, that would like to contribute. We're essentially at the point now where we can go ahead and schedule the contractor to go out and do the work. We're envisioning it's going to be August or September. For more information, you can visit the website is edhsign.org. Okay.
Very good.
Hard pitch is over.
Let's see any other comments, and I'll just remind everybody, our next meeting is Monday, August the 2nd. We'll be back here as planned. And I anticipated asking the chief or one of the chiefs to talk about vegetation management, but maybe it's beyond that point where it has any impact. I don't know, because I was thinking there's always people that don't get the word and then you don't get to clean up and then I get complaints and stuff. Is there anything?
Might not be a bad conversation because we still have a number of folks that are in the process and we can have Ron speak to that for sure.
Okay, so if you're willing to do that, I'd like to sign Ron up then to be our guest speaker. Because I want to make sure we do everything we can before we get to September, because we're gonna have a fire season easily goes into November and maybe December, and Who knows? Because things are just so dry. Even a little bit of rain isn't going to help. It's going to take a lot of rain to saturate the soils again. So, all right, with that, any other, seeing none, I'm going to call the meeting adjourned. A little over 2 hours, not too bad. Thank you all for attendance and yep, appreciate it.
Thank you, EDH Fire.
Yes.
Your staff was invaluable.
Anytime.